Welcome to VeeamON 2026. I'm Brad Lynch, Director of Enterprise Strategy, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Jack Berkowitz, Field Chief Data Officer. Jack, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jack. I've been with security and I was a CDO in a previous career, so happy to be here today.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Your knowledge and coming from security AI and your expertise is so critical to this conversation, which is about converging, resilience, and security. So what we're going to hit on today are really three things. We're going to talk about that emerging threat landscape and hearing from Jack and his expertise. I think the audience and the viewers are going to find so much interest in aspects of this. And then we're going to hit on really the solutioning of this. So converging data resilience and data security and why it's important and needs to happen now. And then one of the first iterations of these joint technologies and joint companies, which is Veeam Intelligent ResOps. So first, let's hit on emerging threat landscape. So something I really like to set in terms of context setting is the industry has evolved and Veeam is keeping up with it. And what I mean by that is whether it was operational resiliency decades ago, right? Why did companies and organizations protect data to begin with? Well, there was, of course, natural disasters and hurricanes and floods and things of that nature. But the real reason was folks like Jack and I. It was humans making mistakes, right? It was a human deleting a file. It was a human deleting a database. And whenever I'd go and meet organizations and ask how often they tested their DR, their business continuity plans, people looked at each other and they almost never did it, right? So they were only really recovering files if a human accidentally did something. And then this thing called ransomware came along, and people took their business continuity plans much more seriously because it was far more common that an event was going to happen. There was more exfiltration concerns where that never existed in an operational world. And I'm sure something you see quite often, Jack, is, well, in this AI resiliency world, I actually kind of compare this more to operational resiliency than cyber resiliency. Not that the bad actors and the threat actors aren't going to leverage AI to their advantage. Of course they are. But I more see in the situations where humans were making mistakes in the operational world, I more compare that in the AI resiliency world, where these over-permissive AI agents are going to be making mistakes at a way more exponential scale than humans were with non-human identities and AI agents, et cetera. And you're going to need to, and by you, I mean organizations are going to need to be better prepared to recover their data and protect their data. And I don't know about you, Jack, but what you see in this kind of new era.
Exactly right. I mean, our jobs, right? Everybody's job in the IT industry is to keep things up and running and keep them moving, right? And so it was interesting. You talk about operational resiliency, hurricanes, but we also have data center outages, right? From the hyper cloud providers, cyber resiliency, like you talked about, but yeah, people make mistakes. Agents are going to make mistakes, and we're starting to see that, right? You see lots of different information coming out on X or in the news about agents making mistakes or people using agents that then make mistakes. And really, what's our job? It's not to scold, it's actually to bring it back up, get it back moving right away.
Exactly, and I think this is a good way to cover that in terms of not only Veeam, but the whole industry, making sure that we're providing technology to have organizations back at kind of every stage of this journey. And what you kind of see here is some stats that back this up, right? So the AI wave is here. I don't think we really need to spend any time proving that out, but there are a few statistics that just show that. I think the one thing that stands out the most to me here, Jack, is that 45 times more non-human identities per human identity. And I don't know if in your travels, what you see or what on this slide really stands out to you.
Well, I mean, I think there's two things, right? It's this idea of the amplification of agents representing you. And then as a company, you need to understand, well, wait a second, is it Brad? Is it Jack? Mm-hmm. Did they give the rights to this agent, or is the agent impersonating them, inappropriately? The other side is when we start to look at the cost, right? And we've been looking at business value calculators to really understand the cost of a bad event. And you start to then add on things as well, regulatory compliance fines, all sorts of other things. Mm-hmm. If you're in the banking industry, right, resiliency is part of what the regulators are looking at. If you're in the healthcare industry, regulators look at this. So these costs start to actually amplify over time.
Well, the cost is a great point, right? And I think one of the big differences between that operational resiliency and AI resiliency world is that blast radius, right? If and really even the cyber resilience. If our account were to get compromised, well, the blast radius is fairly small in terms of where that threat actor can maybe move laterally to the access they're going to have access to. If a threat actor gets access to an AI agent that has access to databases and multiple sensitive files and all these different components, well, now you're talking about a much larger blast radius, right? So I think that's a great point that you bring up. And you were kind of calling out, you called out that meta research one, which is a great one. But these are just a few examples of AI agents creating risk. And almost every day we wake up in the morning to something new. Just the other day we saw that database get wiped out and the backups get wiped out with it. I know you have a couple examples, Jack, that you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at these different examples that are in the news, the one that hits me is, for example, the person who was in charge of responsible AI at Meta live tweeting her own experience with an agent deleting her email, right? And you think about that. This is the person, for most people, would assume that she has full knowledge of agents and she understands how to use them, yet it still can go wrong. And I thought that was the best part of that message from everything. And I commend her for actually exposing it or being honest about it all. But we see, for example, like you were saying, an entire company had its database wiped out a week or two ago. And the implication of that is interesting. They were a SaaS provider. Yeah, they are now in a recovery mode, but they had 400 or 500 customers also in a scrambling and recovery mode, and millions of dollars of expense for them suddenly to have to go from SaaS to handwritten. So this idea of recovering from these events is as important as it is of the event itself. And we got to be thinking about all of that resilience as we go.
And I think what's important to note is a lot of the, that's a case of something accidental. So something I talk a lot about is if AI is touching your data, you need to be protecting it. And that's just a classic example of, okay, the AI deleted the database and the backups, but the backups weren't immutable, right? So we're going to talk more about that. There's a lot of mitigations that could have been put in place that would have easily prevented it, and B, provided a very easy way to recover that data if needed. So a lot of these sometimes just come down to the basics, and it's the same way from a cyber perspective. It's not so much that the tactics are going to change from threat actors leveraging AI, but the rate of execution is significantly increasing in the way that they can move laterally in an environment, in the way that they can exfiltrate data, things of that nature.
And we saw that, right? Anthropic published a blog last fall. I want to say it was October, maybe it was early November, where they were talking about somebody able to use their tools to move at a rate of speed to infiltrate companies that nobody had ever seen before. And if you're using old practices, if you're using the old guidebook that you had on the shelf, it probably needs an update at this point.
100%. It's a great point. So lastly, what we just wanted to hit on here is those common AI threats, right? And this is backed both by the MITRE Atlas Matrix, as well as what we see in our own Veeam maturity model. We kind of made a subjective ranking here, keep in mind. But I think everybody hears about these prompt injection attacks that we absolutely have to take seriously. The overprivileged agent, which we've already mentioned a couple times, which is typically what you're going to see almost every day when you wake up in the news, is that's a result of an agent being overprivileged or not an understanding of the blast radius and the components that they have access to, the data they have access to, which ultimately leads into exfiltration, right? So I think something that's kind of interesting. So Veeam has a whole wing of our business, the incident response side of our business. And something that we see based on the actual incidents we respond to, boots on the ground experiences, for the most part, threat actors before AI were kind of on a treasure hunt when they would exfiltrate data. They didn't know for sure if they were going to steal data that actually mattered to the business. They kind of hoped that it did, and you would result in money for them and a success from their standpoint, from the threat actor standpoint, but they didn't know. Well, with AI, whether it's during the attack or after the attack, with the data, they now have the ability to better understand the data that they've stolen, something that we're going to see come to light a lot more in these attacks. And then, of course, since I think my first presentation out of college was on data sprawl. Nobody's really cared about data sprawl for decades. Sure, it created an increase in the bill, and it was costing the business a little bit more money, but there wasn't a a direct risk, right? A risk exposure associated with it. And I think with AI, that's completely changed. And I'm sure you see that more than anybody.
And you have different levels of risk. Some of it can be backup files of content, like for example, file-based transfers of banking information or other things. And these could just be the backups that are sitting on volumes that nobody's looked at. And so a cyber attacker can get to those, and then you're like, but I protected my prime, but you didn't know about that other backup, and they were able to find it and get it. But at the same time, there could be other costs associated, right? What version of the document is actually the most current one that the actual AI should be using?
Yep.
And if you feed the wrong version in, version 3 versus version 12, all of a sudden you may be inflicting costs, operational costs that are very high as well. So this idea, and we call it redundant, obsolete, and trivial data, ROT data. You may hear that from us quite a bit. This idea of minimizing your ROT data helps you reduce your risk, right, overall. And by reducing that risk, you can then focus in on the things that matter. Instead of trying to secure 27 backups, I just secure the main system and a couple of resiliency capabilities, and then I can actually be more focused.
No, absolutely. And then the last piece here, kind of, you don't back up data to back it up, you back it up to recover. And that last piece here, and something I ask folks is, as part of these AI committees, is anybody asking that question? Well, how do we recover something if it goes wrong, right? So what's that recovery posture look like? I think is really critical. So the last piece is how Veeam, right? If we go back to that first slide of operational resiliency, cyber resiliency, and AI resiliency, right? And we're going to double click on AI resiliency as we start solutioning here. But Veeam has had our customers back in every single stage here, right? So from operational resiliency back to the beginning, of course, the basics of instant VM recovery and additional workloads like Hyper-V, AHV, physical workloads, SaaS workloads, cloud workloads, et cetera, to cyber resiliency, to ensuring we provide our customers immutable backups, malware detection, threat detection, layered and orchestrated ways of recovery, incident response on retainer, things of these nature, and now in this AI resilience era, right? So, of course, bringing in security AI under the Veeam portfolio and adding in solutions like Veeam Agent Commander to inventory, govern, and manage agents and ultimately recover if something goes wrong, and then intelligent ResOps, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later. So let's talk about actually converging data resilience and data security, though, and the importance of that. So we like to think about this as almost a layered cake, right? And each layer is dependent on the previous. So that foundational layer is understanding your data, right? And Jack alluded to this a little bit, but understanding not only your ROT data, but I should say your critical data, but the opposite of that, which is almost the data that doesn't matter. But then governing the data and the AI agents that go with it, and then protecting it. If AI is touching data, my first question is, are you protecting that data? Doesn't matter if it's a database, doesn't matter if it's a file. If AI is touching something in your organization, are you protecting it? And then proving it. Both of us work with a lot of banking customers, and they'll famously say, if I can't prove it, if I can't report on it, then it didn't happen. Doesn't matter if it did or didn't. If I can't report on it, then it didn't happen. Simple as that. And then ultimately, can you recover if something goes wrong? Do you understand the blast radius associated with it? Do you understand the process to recover? Do you understand the RTOs associated with recovering that, et cetera, et cetera? So we're going to double click on each one of these and show you what Veeam is doing to provide solutions to our customers here. So the first piece here, there's really nobody better to talk about this, so I don't want to do it injustice than Jack here on understanding your data. And this was one of the main motivations for the acquisitions in terms of the technology that Security AI has. So Jack, can you take a second and kind of talk about that with us here?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the core of this is really the inventory. Where is everything? And you think that people know, but inside of large organizations, whether it's a Fortune 500 company or whether it's a smaller firm of a couple hundred people, ask them where everything is, and then they start to discover, oh, wait a second, we have some things in a couple of SaaS applications, we sent data to a data partner, we bring data in from other data partners, we have some customer data here, we have some personal data dealing with HR, or maybe it's the benefits package. Where is it all? Okay, so it's where is it in terms of the inventory on it, physical devices, but then also how is it interconnected? What does it mean? And that's where really the representation of it emerges as a graph. And so the core of all of the technology is a graph representation that shows the interrelationships of all of this data, not just the physical asset that it's on, but the content, the significant information inside of there. Is it PII information, personally identifiable information? Is it health information? Or is it business secrets, right? We have customers that, the trade secrets are as important to them as maybe some of the other things. And so how does that all interconnect? Who has access to it? How is it secured? All of that information can be there as part of this data inventory, and it's the foundation of everything else you do. Anybody who says, well, I'm going to go protect your data, but I'm not going to understand where it's at, I don't understand, Are they doing it with paper and pencil? You need to be able to scan, you need to be able to understand everything.
Absolutely, and this was one of the main motivations for bringing Security AI under our wing. We do these data resiliency maturity model workshops for organizations, and almost always a result of them was, well, hey, you need to update your business continuity plans. You need to better understand your data so that you can understand your minimal viable business, your minimal viable bank, your minimal viable hospital. Because if you're going to try to recover 100% of your environment at once versus knowing, well, hey, this is actually the 10% of the data that's going to bring back my business online, well, you just reduced your RTO by 10x if you can better understand your data, map your policies to your data protection plans in turn. And then that second layer is that data and AI governance, right? So of course, not only the data piece of it, but this is where the AI piece comes into place, right? So inventory, having an inventory of all the AI agents in your environment, understanding the data that they have access to, the sensitive data, as Jack just hit on, the sensitive data they have access to, alerting and understanding the privileges and the level of permissions they have and the blast radius that these agents have. And then to Jack's point as well, that rot data, that redundant, obsolete, trivial data, that's just additional risk in the organization that can easily be purged. So not only save money, but also reduce risk in your environment.
One of the areas that we see quite a bit is simply when people have built up environments over the years, particularly around unstructured data, not their databases, but their email and their PowerPoints and their Word documents and their client files. They've put them in essentially shared storage systems, things like SharePoint, things like Box. And the discipline about who has access to what, well, it's sort of lost. And it's not because anybody had any bad intentions, it's just over the course of time, permissions get lost or people overshare information, things like this. The interesting thing then about agents is they have immediate access to all of this. And so whereas a person, you may not go hunt around for certain files, the agent doesn't know any better. So if it has permission, it's going to go get it. Yeah. And so we see that, particularly in SharePoint environments and Office 365 environments, over-permission data happens to every single company.
Yeah, that's a great point. So that other piece, and we've mentioned this a few times, is then having that resilience later. So ultimately, once you understand it, once you govern it, you need to be protecting it, right? And if AI has access to that data, you need to be protecting it. So this is a bit of a high level, but it paints the picture really well of understanding Veeam is going to ultimately protect that underlying data if needed, whether it be SaaS workloads, physical machines, virtual machines, cloud workloads, things of that nature. And we're going to keep it immutable. And the way we keep it immutable is SSH is disabled on this server, single-use credentials, so that even if you get access into Veeam's backend database, you can't even query to find these credentials because we don't store them anywhere. And then what's critical is that you test these backups. That's often where we see things go wrong, is the backups themselves haven't actually been tested. So using automated tools like Veeam Threat Hunter and YAR rules and orchestrated recovery to ensure that if disaster happens, you have a plan in place, and then having that offsite copy. So, Jack mentioned that incident where the threat actor, or not the threat actor, just AI deleted the database and the backups associated with it. Well, that's where having that secondary offsite copy is critical, and that being immutable as well. And then restoring cross-platform. Maybe you want to restore data that was in AWS into Azure, or Azure into GCP, or back on-prem. And that Veeam's portability story is second to none in that area. And then kind of additionally into protecting that data, Veeam has multiple layers of threat detection, right? So whether it's before backup, doing things like recon to detect certain components of suspicious behavior going on the Veeam components, 3 layers of inline scanning during the backup to look for indicators of compromise, known tools that threat actors use for exfiltrating data or encrypting data, and then of course, file system analysis to look for known file extensions that the threat actors use during encryptions, to then what if you're dealing with a day zero, right? So then automated ways of identifying your last clean restore point and restoring that directly into production. And what's critical here is integrating with the tools that you already use. We don't want to be another tool that you have to go into to find signals and find alerts. So integrating with the tools that you already use to find suspicious behavior, and ultimately around all of this is having incident response on retainer, negotiation on retainer, if and when needed. And as we mentioned, right, all of this is, I don't want to say worthless, but all of this doesn't really matter if you can't actually prove your posture. And Jack, I know you know this better than anybody.
Yeah, so when you start to look at these different standards and you start to look at all these different combinations, everything that we just laid out is there. The fundamental about inventory, right? Whether you're dealing with a NIST standard, whether you're dealing with a federal financial regulation, whether you're dealing with GDPR, moving data across borders, you really want to take a look at your data inventory, your access rights, and everything else comes together. And what we have inside the system is the ability to automate or automatically test a series of controls that are put in place, or take some attestations as needed, so that you can understand where you are in that compliance journey. Some of these compliance things aren't just yes or no, but they're maturity over time. And so you can repeatedly measure over time the improvements as you add controls. And this becomes a real powerful 360-degree view of your data. You start at your inventory, you see your agents, you understand your resiliency posture, you understand, as you just were saying, your pinpoint recovery, and then you can show, hey, this is how we comply, whether that's to a regulator, to a board of directors, or just to yourself and your peers at night.
This has been one of the things that when I talk to organizations that their jaw drops when we go through this when I join them, whether it's a virtual or God forbid an in-person conference. But when they see the most recent one, we've been talking about banks, but they wanted to talk about the NYDFS regulation, and when I showed that they could just plug in their AWS accounts and to your exact point, it would populate all the testing controls related to NYDFS and their AWS accounts. They just couldn't believe it. So the power of this is unbelievable. And then that last piece is that ability to recover, right? So something that we really, really hang our hat on is having layers of recovery. Not only something I talk about is, well, what if you could recover without even touching your backups, right? So Veeam's ability to integrate with a number of different storage providers to provide replication and not only backup gives our customers the ability to not only recover from backup, but provide multiple levels of SLAs, right? So RTOs from CDP replication to snapshot replication to restoring in the cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So that ability to surgically recover a file or recover something instantly is second to none in the industry.
Let me just add, having had the opportunity to sit in a number of purple teams with our clients, these are sort of the round tables that the management teams will do. This feels like a black box to them, right? But then what do we do? And so the ability for us to talk about pinpoint recovery, nothing that was talked about years ago, it's revolutionary to most businesses.
100%. And in the AI resiliency world, it's so critical to have that surgical recovery. So with that, what we are really excited to talk about is Veeam Intelligent ResOps, right? So this is really one of the first iterations between the two technologies and the two companies that's going to immediately add a lot of value for existing and future accounts. So let's touch on exactly what Veeam Intelligent ResOps is. So Veeam Intelligent ResOps, specifically for M365 to start, is a way to do a lot of the things that Jack and I just spoke about. It's a way to get full context into that M365 environment. Understand the sensitive data. On the flip side, understand the rot data. What's the point of even protecting and taking up storage for data that maybe is obsolete and doesn't even matter to the business? Tracking every action that not only a user takes, but that a non-human identity takes to that data itself, and then recovering within minutes if needed. So when we look at each one of these, the first piece of this is getting context, right? It's doing exactly what Jack was talking about in understanding your data. So plugging in M365, scanning M365 to see, hey, where's all my PII, PHI, PCI data, etc., classifying that as needed, spotting toxic combinations, right? So for example, maybe you have a SharePoint site with SSN numbers on it. Well, by itself, that's pretty normal. It could be an HR SharePoint site. But is that SharePoint site also something the whole company has access to? Well, now that's not something you want in your organization.
That's right.
The next piece, I kind of refer to this as the opposite, but then spotting rot data, but not only spotting rot data, but taking action on it. You might not just want to simply say, oh, well, here's all my rot data, let's delete it. It's not always as simple as that, but maybe we can tier that out to cheaper and deeper storage instead of taking up space and money on our production data within SharePoint and OneDrive.
And one thing about that, right? A lot of teams always look at this and say, well, we don't know how to put those policies in place, right?
Yep.
It turns out, inside the system, it's easy to do it, and it makes it visible such that you can have those discussions with your business users. So it's not, hey, let's send a spreadsheet of 1 million files to somebody. Let's show them what it is that we plan on. We're not deleting. Maybe we're just going to take it down to a level of storage just below, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe we're going to encrypt some of it. But whatever it happens to be, it's something that they can all see through the policy framework.
Yeah, 100%. And then backing that up, right? We've been saying if AI is touching that data, then it needs to be protected, right? So then ultimately taking that knowledge that Jack was just talking about, taking that knowledge and mapping that and understanding that to the policies that we're going to create so that you can have more intelligent policies, have more better recovery outcomes. And discovering, right? So this is specific to M365 to start, and this is able to discover all the agents within Copilot, all the agents within M365, the sensitive data that they have access to, automatically rolling back any potential malicious or accidental deletions these AI agents take.
And this is exciting because I can tell you this notion of being able to see in near real time what's happening and to be able to recover from it, to understand even the pattern of it, it's a value add, or it's a new capability that I had never seen before, and it's exciting.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And we actually want to show you what this looks like in the few minutes we have left. So we're going to do a quick drive-by and show you what this looks like. So what you're going to see here is a dashboard view of M365. I'm showing you all the sensitive files that the whole company has access to. SSN number, credit card numbers, email address. These are files the whole company has access to. We see this right away. In addition, we see SharePoint sites that are external. These are external to the company that have sensitive data on it that folks outside of our organization have access to. So immediately just bubbling up really, really sensitive alerts here that shouldn't be happening in the organization. The other piece here is creating policies, right? So the first piece is we're going to create a policy that looks for sensitive data. And this might be data that we want to protect and ensure that is protected and protect more frequently. So for example, we have a policy here for SharePoint that's going to specifically look for any files you have out there that have SSNs, social security numbers associated with them. And we're going to say, hey, this is specific for 365. We're going to look for a specific data element, which is a reference to a sensitive data type. And we see that there's 1,800 files, over 1,800 files that have SSNs on them. Well, we're going to use that knowledge to create more intelligent policies, ensure that we're protecting that data. Well, the complete opposite of that is the rot piece of it. So, this could be very custom to your environment. What is maybe that's data older than 10 years? Maybe that's data that's older than 10 years, but also has sensitive data on it. It could be a number of things. We're going to do a very basic one and look for rot data. So any data that's over 1 year old. And we see here that there's over 18,000 files that are over 1 year old. Why do I want to take up space backing up that data to begin with? And also maybe I don't even want that in my production storage, and we can quarantine that, tier that out to cheaper and deeper storage, whether that be an S3 bucket or something of that sort. So really just wanted to do a quick drive-by of what this looks like to show you that this is more than just a few slides.
Yeah, and just on that, right, what you were seeing in those policies are those toxic combinations. Again, is it okay for it to be on SharePoint for the HR team? Is it okay to be on SharePoint externally accessible by a business partner? Two different things, same exact file.
Totally. And the last thing we want to leave you with here is really ask yourself, be honest with yourself. Where are you in this data and AI maturity model journey for your organization, right? And this is something we do where we do assessments for customers to help them understand where they are from a maturity model perspective. But are you in level 1? Do you not have visibility into your AI agents? Are you not protecting data that AI has access to? Are you in level 2? Are you doing some classification, but it's not fully in place? Or are you in level 3 and truly have continuous classification, immutable backups for all workloads AI is protecting? Or are you in level 4 where we want all our customers to be truly resilient, have full data lineage, real-time policy enforcement, surgical recoveries, automated recoveries, things of that nature? So with that, I really enjoyed presenting with you, Jack. I really appreciate you joining me, and we hope everybody's enjoying VeeamON, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.